In the shadows of China's power lies a chilling tale of silenced voices and hidden atrocities. One survivor's harrowing account of forced organ harvesting unveils a dark underworld where lives are commodified and souls auctioned. But will the truth shatter the silence, or will it vanish into the abyss of censorship? Number 1. Tiananmen Square Massacre. In the summer of 1989, the world watched in horror as China's Tiananmen Square became the stage for a brutal crackdown on pro-democracy demonstrators. What started as a peaceful student-led protest calling for political reform quickly turned into a massacre orchestrated by the Chinese government. Tanks rolled into the square, and troops fired indiscriminately at unarmed civilians, resulting in hundreds, if not thousands, of deaths. Despite the passage of decades, the Chinese government maintains a tight grip on information regarding the Tiananmen Square massacre. Any mention of the events of June 4, 1989, is strictly censored, with online discussions swiftly removed and references scrubbed from history books. For many Chinese citizens, especially the younger generation, the massacre remains a taboo topic, shrouded in silence and government propaganda. Yet, despite the government's efforts to suppress the memory of Tiananmen Square, the spirit of those who fought for democracy lives on. Every year, on the anniversary of the massacre, activists and citizens around the world gather to commemorate the victims and call for accountability. The legacy of Tiananmen Square serves as a stark reminder of the ongoing struggle for freedom of expression and human rights in China. Number 2. Tibetan Independence. Nestled in the shadow of the Himalayas, Tibet has long been a focal point of tension between China and advocates for Tibetan independence. For decades, the Chinese government has sought to suppress any dissenting voices and maintain its control over the region, which it considers an integral part of China. However, for many Tibetans, the desire for autonomy and cultural preservation runs deep, despite the risks of speaking out. Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, remains a symbol of resistance and hope for many Tibetans, even as he lives in exile. However, within China, any mention of the Dalai Lama or support for Tibetan independence is met with swift censorship and punishment. Tibetan activists who dare to challenge the Chinese government's policies face harassment, imprisonment, and even disappearance. The flame of Tibetan identity continues to flicker, fueled by a resilient people determined to preserve their culture and heritage. Whether through underground networks or international advocacy, the struggle for Tibetan independence remains alive, even in the face of immense adversity. Number 3. Xinjiang Uyghur Crisis. In the far reaches of China's northwest lies the region of Xinjiang, home to the Uyghur Muslim minority. But beneath the picturesque landscapes and vibrant culture lies a dark reality of state-sanctioned oppression and human rights abuses. Reports of mass detentions, forced labor, and cultural suppression have cast a spotlight on China's treatment of the Uyghur people, drawing condemnation from the international community. The Chinese government's campaign to re-educate Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities in Xinjiang has led to the creation of sprawling detention camps, where countless individuals are subjected to indoctrination and abuse. Families torn apart, children orphaned, and lives shattered, all in the name of maintaining control and eradicating perceived threats to the state. Courageous Uyghur activists and whistleblowers continue to speak out, risking their lives to expose the truth. Their voices, amplified by the global community, serve as a beacon of hope for a marginalized people fighting for their dignity and freedom. Yet, as the world grapples with how to respond to China's atrocities in Xinjiang, the suffering of the Uyghur people persists, a stark reminder of the cost of silence in the face of injustice. Number 4. Falun Gong persecution. In the late 1990s, a spiritual movement known as Falun Gong gained popularity in China, attracting millions of followers with its blend of meditation and traditional Chinese exercises. However, the Chinese government viewed Falun Gong as a threat to its authority and launched a brutal crackdown in 1999. Practitioners were arrested, tortured, and subjected to forced labor camps, with reports of widespread human rights abuses. Despite the persecution, Falun Gong practitioners both within China and abroad continue to advocate for their beliefs and expose the atrocities committed by the Chinese government. They face relentless censorship and propaganda campaigns aimed at demonizing their movement, yet their resilience and determination remain unyielding in the face of oppression. The persecution of Falun Gong serves as a chilling reminder of the Chinese government's willingness to suppress any dissenting voices that challenge its power. Yet, amidst the darkness, the bravery of Falun Gong practitioners and their unwavering commitment to their beliefs shine as a beacon of hope, inspiring others to stand up for justice and freedom. Number 5. One-child policy. For over 3 decades, the one-child policy cast a shadow over the lives of millions of Chinese families, shaping the country's demographics and leaving a legacy of social and ethical consequences. Enforced through strict family planning measures, including forced abortions and sterilizations, the policy aimed to control population growth, but resulted in widespread suffering and trauma. Though officially ended in 2015, the one-child policy's impact continues to reverberate through Chinese society, with millions of unregistered children and a gender imbalance skewed by decades of selective abortions. The scars of forced sterilizations and lost opportunities linger, reminding the world of the human cost of draconian government policies. Yet, amidst the darkness, stories of resilience and defiance emerge as families rebuild and communities come together to heal the wounds of the past. While the one-child policy may have ended, its legacy serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of respecting human rights and dignity in the pursuit of social and economic development. Number 6. Organ harvesting. Allegations of forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience, including Falun Gong practitioners, have sparked international outrage and condemnation. Despite the Chinese government's vehement denials, evidence suggests a systematic and state-sanctioned organ transplant industry operating in the shadows, profiting from the suffering of innocent victims. The stories of those who have escaped the clutches of China's organ harvesting industry paint a harrowing picture of exploitation and abuse. They speak of being imprisoned solely for their beliefs, subjected to medical examinations against their will, and living in constant fear of becoming victims of this heinous trade. Their testimonies serve as a stark reminder of the depths of depravity to which human beings can sink in pursuit of profit and power. While the full extent of China's organ harvesting practices may never be known, the voices of survivors and human rights advocates echo loudly, demanding accountability and justice. The international community's response to these atrocities will be a defining moment in the fight for human rights and dignity, sending a clear message that such barbaric practices will not be tolerated in the modern world. Number 7. Corruption. Despite the Chinese government's ongoing anti-corruption campaigns, endemic corruption continues to plague all levels of society, undermining trust in institutions and eroding the rule of law. High-ranking officials, once thought to be untouchable, have been brought down by allegations of bribery, embezzlement, and abuse of power, exposing the rot within the system. Yet, for every corrupt official caught, countless others continue to operate with impunity, their ill-gotten gains hidden behind a veil of secrecy and privilege. The corrosive effects of corruption can be seen in every aspect of Chinese life, from the halls of power to the streets of rural villages, where ordinary citizens are forced to navigate a maze of bribery and extortion to access basic services. As China grapples with the scourge of corruption, the voices of whistleblowers and anti-corruption activists grow louder, demanding transparency and accountability from those in power. Their tireless efforts to expose corruption and hold officials to account are a testament to the enduring spirit of resistance and hope in the face of injustice. Number 8. Environmental pollution. China's rapid economic growth has come at a significant cost to the environment, with air and water pollution reaching alarming levels in many parts of the country. Despite government efforts to address environmental issues, including the implementation of stricter regulations and investment in clean energy, the scale of pollution remains a major challenge. Communities living near polluting industries bear the brunt of the environmental degradation, facing health problems, displacement, and loss of livelihoods. The stories of those affected by pollution, of children growing up with respiratory illnesses, of farmers struggling to cultivate contaminated land, underscore the urgent need for sustainable development and environmental justice. As China grapples with the consequences of decades of unchecked industrialization, grassroots movements and environmental activists are leading the charge for change. Their advocacy and mobilization efforts are pushing for greater transparency, accountability, and community participation in environmental decision-making, laying the groundwork for a more sustainable and equitable future. Number 9. Censorship and internet control. China's extensive censorship apparatus, often referred to as the Great Firewall, tightly controls the flow of information both online and offline, restricting access to websites, social media platforms, and news outlets deemed sensitive or subversive. The government's efforts to censor dissenting voices and control the narrative extend to social media, where users face censorship, surveillance, and even imprisonment for expressing views contrary to the party line. Despite the censorship, Chinese netizens have found creative ways to bypass restrictions and access blocked content, using virtual private networks, VPNs, and encrypted messaging apps to evade government surveillance. However, the cat-and-mouse game between censors and netizens continues, with the government deploying increasingly sophisticated techniques to maintain its grip on information. The battle for online freedom in China is not just a struggle between the government and its citizens, but also a reflection of broader debates about the role of technology in society and the balance between security and civil liberties. As China's internet landscape continues to evolve, the fight for digital rights and freedom of expression remains a critical battleground in the quest for democracy and human rights. Number 10. Religious freedom. While China officially recognizes 5 state-sanctioned religions, Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, Protestantism, and Catholicism, religious practice outside of government control is heavily restricted. Underground churches, unregistered religious groups, and spiritual movements face harassment, surveillance, and repression, with members often subjected to arbitrary detention, torture, and imprisonment. The Chinese government's crackdown on religious freedom extends beyond traditional faiths to include newer religious movements and spiritual practices deemed a threat to the Communist Party's authority. Groups such as Falun Gong, which blend elements of Buddhism, Taoism, and traditional Chinese practices, have faced particularly harsh persecution, with practitioners targeted for their beliefs and subjected to forced labor camps and torture. Religious believers in China continue to practice their faith in secret, risking persecution and punishment for their beliefs. Their resilience and courage in the face of adversity serve as a powerful reminder of the universal desire for spiritual expression and the enduring quest for freedom of conscience. As China grapples with the complexities of religious diversity and state control, the struggle for religious freedom remains a fundamental human rights issue with far-reaching implications. Number 11. Taiwanese Independence. The relationship between China and Taiwan remains one of the most contentious issues in East Asia, with both sides laying claim to the island nation. Since the Chinese Civil War in the late 1940s, Taiwan has operated as a self-governing entity with its own democratic government and distinct cultural identity. However, China views Taiwan as a renegade province that must be reunited with the mainland, by force if necessary. Efforts by Taiwanese leaders to assert the island's sovereignty or push for formal independence are met with fierce opposition from Beijing, which sees such actions as a red line that cannot be crossed. China has repeatedly threatened military action against Taiwan if it moves towards independence, raising tensions in the region and drawing condemnation from the international community. Despite the political rhetoric and military posturing, many Taiwanese people remain steadfast in their support for self-determination and democratic governance. The island's vibrant democracy and flourishing civil society stand as a testament to the resilience of its people and their commitment to preserving Taiwan's unique identity in the face of external pressure. Number 12. Historical events. China's history is marked by periods of great triumph and turmoil, from the heights of imperial grandeur to the depths of revolutionary fervor. Yet, certain chapters of China's past remain shrouded in controversy and taboo, with the Communist Party exerting tight control over historical narratives to shape collective memory and maintain its grip on power. Events such as the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, which resulted in widespread famine, persecution, and social upheaval, are subject to censorship and official whitewashing. Dissenting voices that seek to challenge the party's version of history or commemorate the victims of past atrocities are silenced, their efforts deemed subversive and unpatriotic. The stories of survivors and historians continue to shed light on the darker chapters of China's history. Their tireless efforts to uncover the truth and ensure that the victims of past injustices are not forgotten serve as a beacon of hope in the struggle for historical truth and reconciliation. Number 13. LGBT rights. Attitudes towards LGBT issues in China have evolved in recent years, with greater visibility and acceptance of sexual and gender diversity in urban centers. However, discrimination and stigma persist, particularly in rural areas and conservative communities, where LGBT individuals face social ostracism, family pressure, and discrimination in employment and housing. LGBT community in China is increasingly organizing and advocating for equal rights and recognition under the law. Pride events, support groups, and online activism provide spaces for LGBT individuals to connect, share experiences, and push for greater visibility and acceptance in Chinese society. While progress towards LGBT equality in China may be slow and uneven, the resilience and courage of the community continue to inspire hope for a more inclusive and tolerant society. As attitudes shift and awareness grows, the fight for LGBT rights in China remains a critical struggle for equality and dignity for all. Number 14. Freedom of speech and press. Freedom of speech and press in China are heavily restricted, with the government exerting tight control over media outlets and online platforms to suppress dissent and maintain its grip on power. Journalists who dare to report critically on sensitive issues face harassment, intimidation, and imprisonment, while independent media organizations are subject to censorship and closure. The Chinese government's censorship apparatus, often referred to as the Great Firewall, blocks access to foreign news websites, social media platforms, and content deemed politically sensitive or subversive. Online censorship is enforced through a combination of automated filters, human moderators, and legal penalties for individuals who spread rumors or false information online. Activists in China continue to risk their safety and freedom to shine a light on issues that the government seeks to suppress. Their investigative reporting, whistleblowing, and advocacy efforts play a critical role in holding power to account and amplifying marginalized voices in Chinese society. Number 15. Democracy and political reform. Calls for democracy and political reform in China are met with swift censorship and repression by the Chinese government, which views any challenge to its one-party rule as a threat to stability and national unity. Dissidents, activists, and pro-democracy advocates face harassment, surveillance, and imprisonment for advocating for political change. Despite the risks, grassroots movements and civil society organizations in China continue to push for greater political freedoms and government accountability. From labor rights activists to environmental advocates, ordinary citizens are finding innovative ways to mobilize and demand a voice in the decisions that affect their lives. The Chinese government's response to dissent and demands for political reform reflects a broader struggle between authoritarian control and demands for greater freedom and democracy. As China navigates the complexities of political transition and social change, the voices of those advocating for democracy and human rights remain a beacon of hope for a more just and equitable future. And that's it from this video. See you in the next one.